action. Well, I've always wanted to do that on Tech Today, but this is a very special episode where I'm your host Aayush Ailawadi and I'm here in London. Now, you must have seen a bunch of EVs on the show. In fact, most recently, you saw the MG ZS EV. A lot of you all wrote into us telling us how you fancied that particular model and how it looks good in electric red. So we thought if you really like the design of that car, then maybe we should get you to the headquarters where all the design elements were put together by our next guest, Carl Gotham. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you.
So Carl, I don't know if you caught our last episode with the MG ZS EV, and we had quite a good time with it, but something that really piqued my interest was the design. And I thought that's a great way to start this conversation with you. You know, I look at these EVs and the EV revolution that we're talking about in India and around the world, and a lot of cars seem to be looking a lot more futuristic. I don't know if it's the Elon Musk revolution around the world and what Tesla did, but even with MGs, we're seeing a certain design language. Is that well thought out? And is that something which varies from region to region, or is that something that happens here in London and then is spread across the world?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. And with ZS in particular, ZS EV, that was kind of designed as a global car for the brand. So MG's obviously on its future journey. You know, it's coming up to 100 years old, but actually as a brand, it's very much about facing the future again and moving into this kind of really exciting territory of electrification. So the design for that really was, it's a global car and it's selling really well everywhere at the moment in India and in the UK. I think this week MG India have announced 100,000 cars sales in 3 years. So it's so the brand's doing very well. And it's there to reflect this kind of move, transition from combustion engine into this future of electrification.
You know, you set up this SAIC Design Center, which is essentially where all the innovation's happening here in the heart of London. And we thought we need to focus a lot more on innovation here in London. Why are so many companies, especially the ones focusing a lot more on design language in the tech world, in the auto world, really looking at London as a hub for this?
Well, I mean, London's always been a very creative kind of capital of the world. It's, you know, it's where the fashion industry is very prevalent and the arts, theatres are everywhere. There's loads of beautiful architecture and it's all very different. It's very sort of diverse. So I think being in a place like London gives the designers, myself and the design team, the kind of exposure to lots of different inputs and experiences, and it's very rich and colourful. So how can that not be inspiring?
Absolutely, Carl. You know, we've tried to get as much color as we could on this shoot, and even though this is a top secret location, we've tried to intersperse a few elements out here. You have a big bunch of VR offerings out here. There's a whole bunch of mock-ups. What happens here at the SAIC Design Studio? Yeah, well,
we're an advanced design studio as part of SAIC Motors, so the parent company of MG Motor, and our remit is really sort of at the front end of the process. So we're here to sort of research and get that kind of context of global trend and what consumers are looking for in the future, and we're exploring what that future sort of design language and trends looks like for the brands that we work for. So of course MG's one of the main ones that we do work for.
So in terms of MG coming up with a supercar, is that something that's in the works?
Well, the model behind you, possibly the audience can see just to the right hand side of yourself, was a concept that we developed 2 years ago. It was shown last year at Shanghai Auto Show. So that's going through into production, and it will be a bit of a flagship for the future vision of the brand. The sporting heritage, but with this kind of very forward-facing electric technology. Right. So we're very excited about that car.
What do you really foresee in terms of the design language for these cars? Are they going to get, look, with EVs coming out there, obviously storage and luggage changes, the battery pack changes things compared to combustion engines, but this shift to EVs, how much does that change the design language of the car?
Well, it changes a lot of aspects from proportion of vehicles in terms of the way they're laid out, as you've sort of mentioned, where the batteries are going, where the motors are going. We haven't got a big lump in the front of the car anymore. We've got a big engine, so that does drive a lot of proportional change. In terms of sort of brand language, obviously identity, we all identify identify a car brand with its face and its grille and so forth, but we don't need big grills anymore. So so a lot of, there's a lot of kind of exploration about how do you convey the message of a brand without a big face, So, and in terms of surface language, absolutely that is changing to a much more kind of clean aesthetic, more simplified, a cleaner language to represent the clean technology, really. So, so there's lots of things happening.
But one challenge that we faced, and we always face it when we have EVs on the show, and I've been trying to search all over London and see what the situation's like, is this sense of range anxiety that everyone talks about, right? In terms of how much do I need to top up or really, fill up the gas tank, so to speak, to actually last on an EV. Now, I know you understand the design and the tech space really well. Is that something as a consumer in London that MG is working on a lot as well? Because in India, we sometimes struggle to find charging stations.
No, it's a real issue, and I think for for a kind of city like London that's very well established, it's there's not a lot you can do with the infrastructure because it's been here for a long time. So it's quite a challenge. It is a challenge for sure, and I know lots of people that own EVs in London. They have that sort of practical issue of where to charge it. I think range anxiety itself is becoming less of an issue because I think people are becoming more familiar with what their cars can do. Obviously battery technology is improving all the time, but actually the reality is that people don't need a car to do more than 150 miles really in one trip average anyway. So but of course the next few years we're going to see those ranges extend massively. So
it's kind of interesting now when we look at some of these iconic brands, especially here in England, Jaguar Land Rover, and then there's an India connection for them, and then with MG, there's a connection in China as well. When you view it as from an auto industry perspective, does it really change the way these companies think in terms of innovation when we actually have a change of ownership from the legacy owners?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key there is it's about entering new markets. It's about entering markets that are growing really quickly. As we know, obviously China has done in the last 15 years. It's exploded to become the biggest market in the world. Obviously, India is growing year on year and is getting into the top volume markets in the world. So actually for any manufacturer, it's a new playing field. It's getting used to new customers, new requirements, new environments, new conditions, which for a designer is a very interesting prospect because it means you've got to think about something new. So I think it's definitely an important factor for any of those OEMs, and I think what you're seeing in the industry is a lot of change. There's a lot of companies that have been doing things one way for a long time are having to change. They're having to sort of progress and get out of their comfort zone. So,
Carl, you were talking about emerging markets, and an issue we face with a lot of EVs that we've been driving on Indian roads, and we were the first to drive a Tesla on Indian roads as well, which is quite a rare occurrence. One issue that we face, and especially with Teslas, because they've gone to so many markets and the ground clearance doesn't seem to change. And that's quite a cumbersome task when you're driving on Indian roads, because you've got to slalom your way across breakers and stuff like that. When you're coming up with a car at MG, and maybe it's specifically for the Indian market or for emerging markets, do you consider these sort of things, which are region specific, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work goes into homologating cars for various markets. So they're not, the way they ride and handle, is different from market to market because of the requirements and how people drive their cars. So I think you might, having spent some time in London, see how people drive here. People tend to drive quite fast. They like the cars to handle relatively well, so they tend to be on the stiffer side, which obviously doesn't suit road conditions that are obviously of a poorer quality, let's say. So I think every market needs to be considered so that we're not making exactly the same car for every single market.
Carl, absolute pleasure having you with us on Tech Today. Thanks so much for this Tech Geek's perspective on what's happening in the EV space and what's really happening, when it comes to design. And the next time, perhaps, when we do this conversation, maybe it'll be in an MG supercar in Mumbai.
Yes, let's hope so. Yeah,
absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, man. Yeah, take care.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.